Hello everybody, welcome to What Culture Gaming. I'm Scott and let's talk about The Last of Us 2. Full, massive spoilers for this. Hopefully you've been through the game. Hopefully if you started playing it, you didn't all rage quit and freak out and run the other way when the big thing happened, and you saw it all the way through, because for as much as that opening thing is a big deal, it's intentional. It's meant to make you feel a certain way, and all those things are why the game's being held up as a 5-star thing, being held up as this transcendent piece of art that introduces negative emotions like feeling sick, feeling actively disgusted, and feeling like you're playing something that is ugly and off-putting and, you know, reprehensible. There's all these words that are associated with the game that are intentional. It's a weird thing. It's almost like a breakthrough in terms of what games can do, in terms of what games can make you feel. And that's why it matters so much. That whole notion that's going on right now of like, oh my god, the game, oh my god, they messed it up. It's all intentional, and as you'll see as I dissect that, that's part of why it's genius. Now, you might not like its overall message, that's totally fine, hate it all you want. The only thing that I am ever going to ask of you is that you play it all the way through before you form your own opinion. Do not just hate blindly, unless you want to, if you're trying to make a serious point about a piece of art. The amount of people that have put their time, money, you know, the amount of hours it's taken to craft this thing deserves better than just some torch and pitchforks mob. So with all that stuff in mind, I'm Scott from WhatCulture.com, and this is The Last of Us 2's ending explained, why it's dividing the fandom. First up, just to reiterate, we're going to be talking spoilers. If you're sticking around, I'm going to assume that you're okay with spoilers. If that is the case, then I can say that Joel dies at the beginning. He dies after about an hour and a half. He's clubbed to death by a golf club by a new character called Abby. It comes out of nowhere, and a lot of people, that was their moment. That was the one where they went, what the hell? I've waited all this time, and I can't believe that one of my favorite characters has just been taken out in a horribly brutal, cheap fashion. So the first point to address here is that Abby, the person who kills Joel, you are absolutely 100% supposed to hate Abby. The way that Naughty Dog set up all their marketing was that we thought Dina was going to die. We thought it was going to be the most, you know, Revenge 101 plot thread where Ellie was looking up, watching Dina die, and then we were going to be taking the fight to the, you know, the WLF or the remaining people, the factions, whoever's left from the Fireflies, whatever that antagonistic force was. We were going to pilot Ellie all the way through, and we were going to, you know, deliver swift justice, and all things would be well. Well, that's not how real life works, and that's not how the fiction that they're painting works either. Naughty Dog want to dissect those mentalities. They want to dissect the idea of hating something, of letting hate become you, how much that gets in the way of you being there for a family member, or gets in the way of you being able to have a conversation about something. It's this stuff that makes it so poignant right now, because it's so easy to hate. It's so easy to give into it and treat everything as these extreme binaries and go, well, I'm the good guy, they're the bad guy, let's just go with that. It's that mentality that they're trying to dissect. It's nowhere near as basic and simple as just revenge is bad, done. Yes, revenge is bad, but living with it is even worse. So to bring this back to Abby, obviously she's a brand new character and she just butchers Joel right in front of us to get a specific reaction. We're supposed to paint Abby as this one-dimensional villain, kind of like a Far Cry villain. You know, the way that she's shot, the way that we see her looking up from Ellie's perspective isn't that far away from the way that we see Far Cry villains. And we always assume, you know, their dastardly monologues or whatever, guys like Vaas and Pagan Min, and dude from Far Cry 5, you know, their motivations aren't going to justify their actions. And it's, again, it's one of the things that Naughty Dog would like to pick apart. What if this villain, this one-dimensional evil force that couldn't possibly justify why they're killing one of our best friends right in front of us? That's one of the most fascinating things to pick apart. Can Naughty Dog manage to justify Abby's actions? Naughty Dog do this whole setup intentionally. Like I said before, you're supposed to be off-put and disgusted by everything that you see. You're supposed to embody Ellie and be like, F you, I want to go, I'm going to kill you, I'm going to do this stuff, I'm going to take the fight to you. That's entirely what they want you to feel. Diving into the very idea of forgiving something so reprehensible is key to why this works so well. Next up is Joel's cheap death. Now, to be honest, death is cheap. Very rarely does death in real life play out the way that we see it in TV and movies. Very rarely are we afforded the luxury of being able to plan for something like that, to have a ring of family members all around saying their last words and, you know, holding a hand as someone passes away. It's almost never like that, and I haven't had any of my loved ones be like that. And so it's That's the thing. If you're going to bring death into a game and into a medium, if you're going to portray death in video games, a medium where death itself is a fundamental mechanic of progressing in so many titles, if you're going to attempt to reframe that, then it needs to land pretty damn hard. I don't think they could have made this work if they did it with Dina. I think if Dina had died, first of all, you would have the whole trope of, like killing your gays trope. As soon as you bring someone in, like Dina and the relationship that she has with Ellie, and you just kill off Dina, that would have sucked. That would have been really cheap and forced, and it wouldn't have worked the same way. By taking someone away that we all have invested in for the last 7 years, and immediately saying, look, someone just came in here and they have a real problem with him, and now he's dead, you're forced to deal with the reality and the ramifications of someone just not being there anymore. And if you've experienced death of a loved one passing away that was close to you for many, many years, you'll know exactly what that feels like. It's horrible, it's sudden, and it makes you feel a whole rush of emotions that are very much human. Again, all of this is intentional. Yes, Joel was saving Ellie, but it prevented the cure for humankind. On a bigger scale, it undid the work of multiple generations of Firefly members signing up to do the right thing for years upon years at a time. Shifting the perspective over and showing us what Abby went through, how she was outside the hospital hanging out with her dad, signing up to this cause to try and do right by the world and save everybody, only for, in her eyes, this psychopath to come in and wipe out her family and friends. Of course, she's going to see that person as the villain. Of course, she's going to have a pretty decent motivation to track that person down. When Abby finally comes face to face with Joel, she barely holds back. She blows his kneecap off with a shotgun and slowly tortures him with a golf club before cracking his skull open. It's not that far away from what Joel did to her father, and Joel didn't have anywhere near as much time spent with Ellie to justify such a violent reaction to wanting to keep her for himself. Essentially, to me, when I saw this stuff unfolding, I didn't think that Abby's actions were that far off what Joel just gave into at the very end of that game. Naughty Dog are very much exploring the idea of physical strength versus mentally thinking something through. I mean, look at Abby, she's turned herself into a living weapon, very much thinking, look, if I ever come across this guy, I'm going to rip him in half. As opposed to Ellie, who goes more inward and sort of becomes more gaunt as the game goes on. The bit just before Abby and Ellie first confront each other, Ellie is extremely skinny, like bone thin. One of her wrists has gone extremely thin. And she, they're opposites. Abby processes the rage outwardly, Ellie very much keeps it inside and bursts and has these little moments of tearing something in half when she gets the chance. Abby's attack is devastating to see and hear, but it succeeds in making both us and Ellie question her motivations more furiously than any other character in gaming history. The ultimate point is that you're not supposed to be okay with this at all. The fact that a game can make you so disgusted is why it's so important and why it's so effective. You're not supposed to be okay with Joel dying, you just have to live with it and move forward. Next up, why you have to then play as Abby for 10 hours. If you're anything like me, Josh Brown, and Ben Roy, when we first went through it, I've only talked to those guys so far, when the camera switched over to Abby and we realized that we were playing as the character that you're supposed to hate, I immediately thought, okay, I see what you guys are doing, you want me to empathize, and yep, I get it, fine. However, it's because they drag this out for 10 hours, and I say drag only in terms of, to me, I wanted to get back to what was happening with Ellie, and I started predicting the way the story was going to go. I started assuming that as soon as, I'm going to play as Abby, and as soon as I get back to being with Ellie, they're going to have one big fight and that'll be it. Obviously, there's so much more after that fight. But at the time, when you start seeing the Abby sections unfold, the fact that it goes on for so long, the fact that you replay all 3 Seattle days from Abby's perspective, that forces a level of human perspective that you wouldn't get anywhere else. You wouldn't get it in a book, a TV show, or a movie. The fact that you're literally controlling this person that you're supposed to hate for 10 straight hours. I would hazard to guess that if you sat down with someone that you disagreed with and forced a conversation for 10 hours, or was forced to see what their life is like for 10 hours, you'd probably come away with a different perspective. The only way that you can come out of the Abby section still hating Abby is if you hang on to that hate that you had first time round, if you fundamentally discard the human qualities that are present, that are right in front of you, that are coming from this person who, in her eyes, is just trying to avenge her father. Abby is completely innocent until Joel comes in and destroys her life's work. It's only because of that that she gets more hench, she gets more militaristic, and she becomes more aggressive in her pursuit of, again, in her eyes, her version of justice. The Abby section, whilst the first time you go through it feels drawn out and elongated and oh, it's a bit like a side quest or whatever, it's not. It's just as important as Ellie, and it's meant to get you thinking. Why are you still hating this person when you're being presented with the reasons for why they're doing what they're doing? It's not about Revenge 101, it's about why we get held up on those mentalities in the first place. Is Abby justified? Is Ellie justified? Both, no, if you want to go down the human violence route, but the point is that you're being shown why. It's this choice, this hugely ambitious, risky, artistic choice that, coupled with Joel's earlier death, lies at the heart of this game's controversy. So many people just want Abby to die no matter what, and I would hazard to guess that those people haven't actually played the game through. Next up, you're not supposed to be on Ellie's side in the final third. The whole sequence where the game cuts forward after Abby spares Ellie and just says, look, I don't ever want to see you again, and we cut forward to what Ellie and Dina's home life is like. Dina's finally given birth to Jesse's kid, and they affectionately refer to him as Potato, and it's one of my favorite depictions of home life and peace and calm and just living as a family in any piece of media ever. I absolutely love this sequence, and it really shows. It's almost like the Red Dead 1 going back to the farm sequence, except that at this point, if you're anything like me and you kind of fell in love with these characters, you just love that one, Ellie's been spared and that Ellie and Dina are still together. Because of all this calm though, as soon as Tommy comes back into the picture and sits down, I at that moment in the story had no idea what Tommy was going for, and as soon as he sits down, rolls out a map and just says to Ellie, hey look, we've tracked down Abby again, the immediate feeling I had was hesitance and just not wanting to even entertain the idea of giving up this beautiful homestead again. Naughty Dog are very much commenting on that idea of giving back into a war mentality, of thinking that you're at war with someone and that being your salvation, that actually if you take out this evil force, you'll somehow be more at peace. When, to be honest, looking at most of the data, you need to go through those things yourself and figure out exactly why you're harboring those thought processes in the first place. Whilst the game isn't necessarily about, going to war, there are depictions of masses of humans both warring with each other over ideologies, philosophies, religious doctrines, things like that. They're very much touching on the idea of not being able to let go and needing to fight. It's something that we struggle with clearly across the board, and I totally champion their approach to that. So like I said, as soon as Tommy points out, hey look, you have one more mission left to do, and he's more justified, quote unquote, in terms of, Tommy's the guy that's lost his brother at this point. You can see why he'd want to go on this crusade to take out Abby, because to him, she still is this one-dimensional villain. He hasn't seen the things that we've seen as an audience. He hasn't been given the wider perspective of why Abby does what she does. To Tommy, Abby is this person who came in and mercilessly beat his brother to death. So again, without that perspective, you can see why he would want to go on this mission again. Point being though, that when Ellie eventually gives into this, gets up at 3 in the morning and leaves ostensibly her wife and her child to go on this fruitless revenge kick just because she thinks she's supposed to. She says, look, I can't sleep, I'm not focusing properly, I'm still very much haunted by visions of Joel dying. Then we're left to read as the audience, well, assumedly if she kills Abby, then that'll sort everything out. She doesn't even say goodbye to her child, she just leaves in the middle of the night. It's a really, really sad note, and you're not supposed to be on her side here. You're not supposed to be campaigning to take Abby down, you're supposed to be feeling sorry for Ellie. Ellie is literally given a family life and a salvation, and she walks away from it. If there's one overall takeaway before the end of the game, it's that. It's that if you're given your homestead, your peaceful way to live forward, and your enemy has forgiven you, take it. Why wouldn't you? And all of this brings us full circle to the very end. Can you forgive an enemy? I mentioned at the very beginning about feeling sick and stomach churning and those general sorts of emotions. All of those were tied to this final fight. We literally see Ellie sort of accidentally save Abby because she's being held up on one of these big pillars. She's being held by this group called the Rattlers, and Ellie comes in and sort of accidentally frees Abby. She's there to kill her, but in the process she ends up getting Abby down off this big pillar thing, and they go to the boats. And the way the scene is framed is like, look, here's your out, and here is, you can go this way, you can go that way, and everything will be fine. Ellie very much doesn't do that, and as soon as she holds this wound that she has on the side of her chest, she sees the blood on her hand, and she remembers why she's there in the first place, to avenge Joel, and she goes back, pulls on Abby's hair, threatens Lev's life, to force another fight out of Abby. That whole final sequence, that final fight where they're just cutting each other and ripping wounds open, punching and kicking and bruising and breaking bones, that whole thing was the thing that I thought was a hell of a depiction of human violence, because when you really think about it, how many of us are ever going to see up close depictions of human on human violence, real human on human hatred? It's a disgusting thing to see, and you should never see it in real life. And I think that, again, that's one of the most poignant things that the game gets across. It all comes from the amount of time we've spent as Ellie and as Abby, and knowing that neither of these people actually need to fight each other. They're only doing it because they think it'll help in the long run. And that's part of why this game means so much, because by the time you get through this fight and you hit credits, you realize just how futile holding on to those toxic mentalities really is. Both characters end up as bloody, exhausted messes until Ellie is strangling and drowning Abby underwater. Here, at the zenith of her actions, her face contorted into a mess of anger, sadness, malice, and perhaps some satisfaction, Ellie ultimately spares Abby. She realizes that killing her and strangling her underwater isn't going to bring her any peace in any potential way, and Abby leaves. Ellie goes back home, realizes that Dina was true to her word, as she said before, look, I'm not going through with this again if you're going to leave, and Dina has taken the baby and cleaned the whole house out. The only room that's left is Ellie's different possessions. It's one bedroom that's left. Ellie plays guitar, Joel's guitar, realizes that she's still holding on to Joel, leaves Joel's guitar in the bedroom, and walks off. That's the game. This action of sparing the person who killed your father figure and friend is kind of being seen as weak online, but the overwhelming feeling, at least for me, was sadness, of being overwhelmed at this depiction of violence, and being thankful that two people I care about are now not tearing each other apart anymore. The Last of Us 2 is asking if after everything you could forgive or at least understand this individual that you've conditioned yourself to hate. Multiple times through the story, Abby and Ellie are proven wrong about the machinations behind the WLF or the Seraphites. They're forced to see people as human rather than one-dimensional villains it's easy to hate. The Last of Us 2, despite having to dig deep into the human psyche to spotlight our worst primal tendencies, is in the end an incredibly positive, philanthropic, and pro-life game. I know that sounds crazy because the game is so glum and dark and there's blood everywhere and cuts and bruises and people dying and throat stabbings and whatever, but you have a game that champions the idea of settling down with a family. Multiple characters burst into song when they're around each other. It's very intimate. There's a very honest and necessary portrayal of sexual relationships in this game that you just don't find anywhere else in a video game. Last of Us 2 is very pro-nature as well. Multiple times you come across different animals, and you even get to go through a whole museum with Joel and Ellie just remarking on human history and animal history and what happened with the dinosaurs and things like that. Last of Us 2's overall takeaway message is be thankful for what you have, challenge why you think you're supposed to hate something, and maybe you can find some common ground before things escalate to getting human on human. Naughty Dog's latest is a clarion call for empathy and understanding, of fighting through our nature of easily hating to strive for something better. We see heroes and villains flirt with peace and resolution, but get drawn into the same conflicts over and over simply because they choose physical violence over anything else. As a AAA release from one of the biggest companies in gaming right now, yes, it is a huge artistic risk to kill off one of the most beloved main characters of the last decade and the generation overall, but I think it's a risk worth taking. And once you take the full context of the game, not just blindly hating because of something that you saw, from leaks or wherever you saw it online, the overall message is humbling, it's sobering, it's powerful, necessary, it's essential. It's all the words I can throw at it that will make you hopefully give it a shot. At least that's what I got out of The Last of Us 2. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Maybe you're still hating it, and maybe you got all the way through and you've got a whole bunch of reasons as to why you're justified in hating it. Please just let me know. Hopefully you've played enough of the game to be able to form some in-depth thoughts and some nuanced takes on it overall, and not just go with the most easy access hate type stuff. For now, I've been Scott from WhatCulture.com, and I'll catch you soon.